You are a living part of a living universe. This universe is alive and it knows it. And it likes it. It likes itself. It loves itself. And it has an unquenchable thirst to experience itself. And it does this in many ways, one of which is that it reproduces itself in individualized forms or expression. You are one of these expressions. And all that it is, all that the Father has, is yours to be experienced. Now, obviously, we haven't experienced it yet, have we? Some of it, but not all of it. We have not experienced our wholeness. We have not put on that mind, that complete mind, that whole self that we are destined to experience. And anything short of that experience is dis-ease. We will never find our ease until we're in the larger experience. And if we're trying to make the smaller experience fit us, it won't work. We will be discomforted. It's like trying to get size 11 shoe on my foot. I'm not going to tell you what size it is, but an 11 won't fit. And you have tried to put a size something on your mind, and it won't fit. It won't fit. The ideas that you have filled your mind with about yourself will not fit you, and that's your disease. Now, to be healed merely means to be made whole. That's all. Let me ask you, do you want to be healed? Do you want to be made whole? Do you want to live? To come alive? I'm talking about really alive. I'm talking about the kind of livingness that makes man in his normal condition appear to be dead. I'm talking about really turned on to life. Now be very careful before you answer this question, because you might not tell yourself the truth. When I said, do you want to live, many of us were nodding our heads like this. But we've all been known to deceive ourselves, haven't we? We've been known to lie to ourselves about other things. And I suggest that you wait until after class, and maybe after you've found a quiet place and sat down and become alone with yourself for a time before you answer the question, am I willing to be healed? And sitting there, probably one of the first replies that might come back to you would be, well, of course I would want to be healed if there was really anything wrong with me. See how we lie to ourselves? Why do people have to be at death's door before they develop an intense desire for life and for the fullness of life and all that life could be for us? I've known people in my life who were absolutely, excruciatingly, painfully miserable. And their voices sounded like it, and they acted like it, and they just did not want to be alive until they were about to die, and then they wanted to be alive. They didn't want to turn loose. Have you seen someone like that in your life? Why is it that every moment of our lives we are not turned on to being alive and vitally and intensely caught up in it? Why should it not be an exquisite joy moment by moment? Do you think that eternity is going to begin some time later when you get there? And that happiness can come when you're surrounded by all of the things that haven't happened yet? What is it that's going to cause us to reach out and become eager and willing to experience the fullness of life? because we cannot experience the fullness of life until we ask for it, until we become ready for it. Now, most people are working very hard at not living, at not being alive. And by that I mean that they're working to develop all of the attitudes and thoughts and emotions that lead gradually and slowly into a state of nothingness. And then when the nothingness comes as a result of producing the conditions that bring about the nothingness, they wonder what has happened. Where's my life? Where is my joy? Where is my fun? Then they desperately hold on to the things that are killing their livingness. You see, they'd rather have those things, those ideas, than to be healed. To be healed means to be made whole, to be returned or restored to our original condition. Now, this doesn't mean to be restored to anything that we have experienced in this life. To be healed to a former state known. No, it means to be restored to a condition that is beyond where we have been, that we have not seen yet fully and clearly, nor have we experienced in ourselves, and yet we have seen examples of it. The lives of many people. There is a reluctance on our part to move beyond where we have been before. And we're going to have to go beyond where we have ever been before if we're going to be healed. We're going to have to come into a new consciousness, new states of mind, new attitudes. And this requires the willingness on the part of the individual, because until we ask for it and reach for it with all of our hearts, it will not happen to us. God is very gentle and will not impose himself upon you. The greatest disease that we have is our human condition. And yet this is the state that we are the most apt to defend. Oh, how we defend our humanness. I'm only human, aren't I? And the answer to that is no. You're more than human. And it is that more than human state that we're seeking to be restored to, because it is in that state that we will find our healing. You will never find your healing, your joy, your prosperity, your identity in your human condition. No, it will not fit into your human condition. The solutions to our problems will not come in our purely human condition. That's a state of mind that we're going to have to get up out of and move away from. Most people would just rather not do this because we're so identified with that condition. There are no solutions in the mind that is connected to the five senses or the intellectual sense consciousness. As we've talked about so many times before, it's that consciousness that looks to the outer world for the stirring up of its solution or its healing. Now, I'll tell you a story about that in a few minutes. But first, let me tell you that remind you that for several weeks now we've been working with our minds to bring about a movement in our consciousness, a stirring up of the waters of our minds. And we've taken these 12 steps that we've been working with, or the way, and these 12 steps happen to be a complete system of thought. 12 meaning whole or complete, that's a metaphysical number for wholeness. The 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 sons of Jacob, many, many other examples. It's a universal system. It's ancient, meaning it's not new. And yet it's a new way of thinking for man. By new, meaning it's new thought, it's thought that his intellect does not normally accept. We don't think this way in our normal condition or in our human condition. It requires a kind of reversal of thought to begin to think from the position of each of these 12 steps. You see, these ideas are above our merely human condition, and will raise us above our human condition into the realm of superpower and intelligence, because that mind that is greater than we are thinks from these ideas. That's the dimension of life where healing is and where solutions are, and where really being alive is the norm. And being alive, like living with joy, with a sense of beauty, and being at the right place at the right time, understanding, knowing, seeing, and hearing, and being a part of the universe in a way that man in his normal state simply cannot experience or comprehend. That's our destiny, to have this experience, to put on this experience. I'm looking for the 12 steps. Now, let me read to you the steps that we have been shaping our minds around. We admitted that we were powerless, that our lives had become unmanageable, and you can see immediately that that is not a normal action of the mind. We admitted and accepted that we cannot manage our own lives. And then we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to our spiritual condition, or could restore us to sanity. Our human condition would be equated with insanity. If that condition is sanity, then anything below it is not sane, not orderly, not divine, and in that non-divine state we will not experience that which we are looking for and which we need. We next made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him, recognizing that we don't understand Him. God understands Himself. And then we began to make a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves, an honest examination of our minds, remembering and writing down the events of our lives and our reactions to these events clearly and honestly, and examining our minds as we exist today relative to all of the important areas of our lives, and doing this in a written form. And if you've not completed this part of your 12 steps yet, don't be dismayed or disturbed. Just continue as quickly and yet as honestly as you can. You'll have time to catch up. I've been absolutely delighted with the reports that so many of you have been giving me about the startling discoveries that you've been making about yourselves with this fourth step. Every day my mail is about that much thicker with letters that you're writing me about it. My phone has been ringing, and some of you have been stopping me in the hall and telling me these beautiful things. This morning in bed, I awakened. Before I arose, I began to take steps 1, 2, and 3. I became aware, I admitted to myself, that this day in which we now are, that I was not capable, that Jack Boland, self of me, was not capable of managing my life this day. And gosh, that felt so good. I can't successfully fulfill the conditions that I've committed myself to on a continuing basis. Does that surprise you? But then I came to remember, to believe again this day, that a power greater than myself can do for me everything that I have to do for myself. I came to not only believe it, but to enter into the experience of it. It became a living experience for me at that moment, an exciting experience. I believed this morning, and I have believed every time today that I've thought about it, and that's been a number of times, that the same intelligence that sustains the universe is working through me for my good. Does that sound presumptuous to you? I believe it. And do you know what? I have experienced it this day in ways that are tangible, valuable, and exciting to me. Now, when I step further, I turned my will and my life, everything that I am, over to the care of that power as deeply as it was possible for me to do this morning with feeling. And while I was in the process of doing this, suddenly I was aware of a very important area of my life that has to do with an aspect of my responsibility in this church that I have been trying to manage or run or solve myself. I caught myself this morning looking back and saying, no wonder you haven't found the answer to that, Jack. You've been trying to do it. Golly, I thought, there, I've done it again. And that was marvelous, because right then I turned that part of my responsibility over to the care of that power that was vibrating in me and all around me, and I instantly knew that the perfect solution would unfold, and I know it absolutely and completely at this moment. That's the way it works. To see where we're making mistakes, the mistake of omission as well as commission, and to make the correction. I told you a few minutes ago that I would tell you a story about the five senses that do not realize the power of spirit. I'll read you this story. It's from the 5th chapter of John, beginning with the first verse. And it has to do with a man who knew more about healing than anyone else in the history of the earth that we've had any reports about. He really knew how to do it, to experience it himself and to help others to experience it. And this man was returning to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish religious holidays. And inside the city, near the sheep gate, was Bethesda pool. Now, the word Bethesda in the Hebrew really means house of mercy, house of loving kindness, house of healing, or the place of healing. Now, what it really means is the healing consciousness. Bethesda is in you. Inside you there is a place or a house or a pool of healing current, consciousness. It's there in you. It already is. Just inside the gate of your consciousness. Now, this pool was covered with 5 platforms or porticos or porches. And what this means is that this pool is covered over by the sense consciousness. The 5 porticos mean that sense consciousness. The healing pool in us, our spiritual condition, is covered over. Now, crowds of sick folks. I'm reading to you literally what it says. Crowds of sick folks, lame, blind, or with paralyzed limbs, lay on these platforms. That's the human race. The human race that's living from its 5 senses is a crowd of sick folks lying on the portico, waiting for what? Well, listen to this. Waiting for a certain movement of the water. Waiting for something outside them to create the proper conditions so that they could then have the healing that they were seeking. Isn't that the human condition? Isn't everybody waiting for something outside them to get right so that they can be healed? Now, one of the men lying there had been sick for 38 years. In the Bible, the word or the number 40 is a mystical or metaphysical number, and it means the period of time necessary to complete a process. An example would be, let's take alcoholism, because we've all seen that and understand it. An alcoholic has to drink for 40 years before he has completed the process of drinking and is willing to get sober. 40 actual years? No, it may only be 6 years or 6 months. But it's the period of time necessary for him to get sick and tired of being sick and tired. That's 40 years. Do you follow that? Now, this fellow had been lying there sick for 38 years, meaning he was about ready. Now, when the master healer saw him, he knew how long he'd been ill. He knew, in other words, he knew he was about ready. Doesn't make any difference how long, as long as the guy is about ready. Now, let me ask you this. In working with the people that you know, do you know when somebody's ready? You bet you do, and you know when they're not ready, too. And of all of the people lying there, he saw this one person who was about ready, and he asked him, "Would you like to get well? Would you like to get well?" And the man said, "I can't. For I have no one to help me into the pool when the water moves. And while I'm trying to get there, someone else gets in ahead of me." You see, he was stretched out paralyzed, and every time this action took place, and the idea was that the first one in got fixed, and then the rest of them had to wait till the next time. Now, what kind of a healing process is that? Well, this is what he believed. Now, this brings something else to our attention. Sick people don't help each other. They're all standing there trying to be first. They're not helping the other person. It's the well people that can help the sick people. And Jesus told him, "Stand up. Stand up." Meaning, stand up straight inside yourself and roll up your sleeping mat. Roll up this idea that you've been stretched out on, sound asleep to your spiritual condition for 38 years. Roll it up and go home. Go home. Now, does home mean to that house that he had down the street? No. Home meant to his spiritual condition, to the place where the solutions are, where peace and prosperity is. And instantly the man was healed, and he rolled up the mat and began walking. Now, there's a lesson in that for us, and let's see if we can get to it in a moment. First of all, the five senses do not recognize or realize the power of spirit to heal. You see, spirit is not real to the senses. They can't realize it or make it real. Now, I think it was last week here I heard a husband speak to his wife that come to class in two cars, and he said to her, he told her to do an impossible thing. He said to her, "Go straight home. Go straight home." You can't go straight home. You can't go straight anywhere. It's literally impossible to go straight anywhere. You see, to get where you want to go, if you're driving your car, you steer yourself to your destined goal by a series of mistakes. Watch you driving yourself home tonight. You'll steer to the right and to the left and then back to the right, and you're constantly compensating. You're not going straight home. And each one of these mistakes you correct. And you correct it usually unconsciously, but you're making a series of corrections. You are groping your way home. You're not going straight home. You can't go straight anywhere. Even light does not go in a straight line. Einstein proved, to his satisfaction and mine, you may not believe it, that you can shine a light right straight out ahead of you, and if you'll stand there long enough, it'll come back and strike you on the back of the head. That light does not go in a straight line. It takes about 5 billion years. You may get tired of standing there, but it comes back full circle. Everything comes full circle. You see, there may not be a single straight line in the entire universe. Don't quote me on that. But nature does not deal with straight lines. Go out and look at the horizon or the sky or the grass. It's very hard to find a straight line. You think you're looking at a straight line, but get around and look at the other side of it. It's crooked. You see, we get where we wish to go by constantly correcting our course. In Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, we learned that man has a built-in goal-seeking device. The word cybernetics comes from a Greek word which means the steersman. There's a servo mechanism that is constructed in the mind that automatically steers its way to a goal or a target or an answer or home. It gropes its way there. Now, science has reproduced this servo mechanism and uses it in many, many devices, many devices. A torpedo gets to its target by using the servo mechanism, and it is constantly steering its way to where it wishes to go. And it has to use positive and negative feedback. Remember, the Master said, "Let your words be yea, yea, and nay, nay." You see, this mechanism does not respond to positive feedback. If it's already doing the right thing, it just keeps on doing it. Now, if you're already doing the right thing, then I'd say keep on doing it, but very carefully examine whether it's the right thing or not. But when it comes to an error, which means it has gotten too far off course, it steers back in the opposite direction. It's a corrective mechanism that steers back in the opposite direction, but to accomplish its goal, it needs negative feedback. It keeps going forward, making errors, and continually correcting these errors. By a series of zigzags, it literally gropes its way to the goal. So then errors, or what we would call errors, are necessary if we're going to find our direction in life. The mind has the same action. But now suppose you're one of those people who never makes mistakes. You've got a real problem then, don't you? You can't get where you want to go. I used to say, well, I may not always be right, but I'm never wrong. And so I kept steering in one direction all the time. I didn't have anything to give me the necessary feedback, and I ended up in a ditch, and I'll guarantee you it was some ditch. Because I didn't have anything to supply the mind with the necessary negative feedback, and I couldn't go home. Now, suppose you make mistakes, and you know you make mistakes, and they depress you terribly, and you're very self-conscious about your mistakes, very guilty about your mistakes, and you can't bear to face these mistakes. Guess what? That's worse than not believing that you make any, because you won't have any negative feedback. You won't look at your mistakes or examine them or begin to see them in a positive light, and what happens then is the mind continues to reproduce its mistakes. It keeps moving in that direction and can't stop to reverse itself. Santayana once said that he who cannot remember his past is doomed to repeat it. I would say this, that he who has not made his peace with his past is doomed to repeat it. You see, our past has a way of continuing on and becoming the future. Have you ever had that experience? You were just sure that you were through with something, and then here you found yourself repeating the same cycle again. No one here has ever had that experience, have they? But suppose that you could use that experience as negative feedback to correct yourself to move in the other direction. Suppose you could not forget your past, not suffer with your past, with the events of your past and the patterning of your past life. Suppose you could take your inventory and begin to see it as an asset. Make your peace with it and become willing to use it. Let it begin to be your monitor, your guide, so that you could steer yourself by it. But away from it. Away from it. Then it begins to give you the negative feedback that you need in order to reach your goal, to arrive home. And this is the only way that the mind can work. Now, where is the goal? Where is home? Is home the house in which you live? No. It's your spiritual condition. It's sanity. It's Christ or cosmic consciousness. Give it any name that you want to, but it's that place inside yourself wherein if you are in it, you will experience the healing that you need in the body, the mind, in all of your affairs. In man, the goal is, it's not our goal, it's the goal that has been assigned for us. It has been given to us from above, means more than mere survival. To be alive means more than to just survive. Each one of us has certain physical needs that, of course, must be met. But living is more than merely meeting these needs. It's more than fulfilling the needs of the body and the sex drive for the procreation of the species. Because you have certain emotional and spiritual needs that were put into you. You don't need to take credit for them. You were created so that you could fulfill the highest need that you've ever experienced. And it's natural that you should be able to do so. And you have a mind in you that can provide answers to all of your problems, to the fulfilling of these needs, if we understand the system, if we fulfill the conditions. That mind can invent, it can write poetry, it can run a business, it can sell merchandise, it can explore new horizons in any field, it can attain sobriety or sanity or peace of mind, it can develop a better personality, a conscious contact with God, It can achieve success in any activity which is intimately tied into your livingness. And it will do all of these things automatically, in an effortless way, providing we don't have too many bricks in our bucket. What I mean by bricks in our bucket? Well, let me tell you about a fallacy about positive thinking. There's an old story about how to clear up the muddy water in a bucket. You just set it under the faucet and turn on the water and go off somewhere, and when you come back, the fresh water running into the bucket will have cleared away all of the muddy water. You just let it drip, 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 and eventually the water in the bucket will be clear. And that's true. That's a cute story. It's true. But it really doesn't mean a whole lot, because it doesn't go far enough. This is one of those half-truths that will half-kill you if you don't understand what lies beyond that. You see, the mind requires more than positive thoughts dripping into it. And the muddy water is a problem, of course, and the fresh water, the fresh new thoughts, are absolutely necessary. Have you ever been filling your mind with fresh new thoughts, reading new books and listening to speakers like me and sitting in prayer and meditation, and all this fresh water is just running over you, and you're sitting there with a lump in your gut that won't go away? Now, don't some of you tell me that you haven't, because I've talked to you. I know. You see, the real problem is the debris in the bottom of the bucket. It's not the muddy water. It's not the flotsam, that which will float to the top and then you can see it and it moves away. It's the jetsam. It's the wreckage that settles to the bottom and stays hidden from view of the consciousness. And dripping water won't do it. You can run water in a bucket all day long and it won't float a brick or a rusty nail, will it? And we've got some bricks in our bucket. Positive thinking is no substitute for examination, for introspection. And some of us are going to keep those bricks down there because we don't want anyone to see them. No way. Except now we're becoming willing because it's all right. Now there's a fallacy about healing. You see, we assume that everyone who needs to be healed wants to be healed. It's not correct. If a person is experiencing an extreme difficulty, it's usually because they are making a marvelous demonstration of their own minds. Did you know that? Their sickness is frequently a better demonstration than someone else's wellness. You bet. Think about it. Healing requires a conscious changing of the mind. It requires a conscious releasing of the old patterns, the old thought impressions, the old ideas, the old emotional responses. It requires the willingness to get the bricks out of the bucket that are causing the damage. Maybe you, if you read the Detroit Free Press today, saw the story of a happy couple. Have you seen a happy couple lately? Here's a picture of Rosie the crane and her keeper. Let me read it to you as it's in the Free Press. And she's standing there dancing and squawking and looking him straight in the eye and just loving him. I wish you could see the picture. You can after class. Rosie the crane dances affectionately as she sees Phineas Motsey, keeper of a bird sanctuary in South Africa. You see, Rosie thinks she's a person, not a bird. And she thinks Motsey is her mate. In a process known as biological imprinting, Rosie identified with the first moving thing she saw after hatching. That was Motsey. Now, Rosie will have nothing to do with other cranes. And in season, she does her mating dance for Motsey. She lays infertile eggs and tries to hatch them. Rosie may not be too smart, but she's happy. Well, I doubt that, because I think Rosie would be much happier being a crane than trying to be a person. And I think we would be much happier being our real selves rather than trying to put on these old ideas about ourselves that are untrue. I think that Rosie's got a brick in her bucket. Now, you'd have a hard time getting Rosie to become willing to be a crane, I guarantee you. See, her mind is already made up, isn't it? She thinks she's a human being. Now, this year and then next year, her eggs aren't going to hatch out. But Rosie's not going to face up to why. Now, how is it in your life? Look at your eggs. Are they hatching out? Are your dreams hatching out? If they're not, why are they not? Are you willing to look at and find out why they're not happening? Are you willing to look inside yourself at the biological imprinting? Maybe the first thing you saw in life you thought you were like your parents. Maybe you've been trying to reproduce the same goofiness that you saw in life and disliked and tried to run away from. Maybe, I don't know what it is, but become willing to look within yourself and find out why. Ask yourself, do I really want to live? Many years ago, a friend of mine was in intensive care in critical condition with a massive heart attack. His wife called me because she knew that I believed that God could heal anything. I was praying for Bob, and in meditation it became absolutely clear to me that his sickness was an actual demonstration that he had made with his mind. He wanted out of his living experience. He thought he wanted out of it, and was trying very hard to find a way out, and was just about to succeed. You see, all of us are looking for an easier, softer way than going out there tomorrow. You bet. And I went to the hospital, and it was difficult to get in to see Bob. They didn't want to let me in, but I found my way into the intensive care ward, and he was quite alert, quite ill, and we briefly spoke. And I said to him, do you want to live? Do you want to be healed? And he started to nod his head and say yes, and I said, Bob, you're lying. Now that's a hard thing to say to a man that's lying there about to die. But I had to say it. I said, Bob, you have felt your inadequacy as an attorney, and you're tired of supporting your wife and those 4 children, and you have just gradually stopped living, and now you're trying to take the ultimate way out. He sat there, and I can see now the shocked expression on his face, and in a few moments he nodded and agreed, and there was silence between us, and he said, will you pray for me? And I said, not until you tell me that you want to live. Do you want to live? Do you want to be healed? And he said yes, and I knew he did. And in a very short time, he was out of that hospital, healed and whole. I had almost an identical situation again sometime later with a stranger. I walked in a strange person's hospital, not the room, the intensive care ward, and said the same thing. And he reversed his thought, and he lived. The hardest part of counseling, anyone will tell you, is to get the person, number one, to admit that they have a problem in back of the problem. Everybody's got a problem, but they don't want to admit the problem that's back of it. That's the brick in their bucket. And then to want to be healed. Everyone wants something else to change without being changed. Not long ago, a dear little mother called me about her daughter. She said that she couldn't handle her daughter anymore, that the girl was out of control, and she was dating a fellow that was going to ruin her life. She was staying out too late and drinking and smoking pot. She just knew she was. And she wouldn't tell her mother where she was going or when she would be home. She just wouldn't listen. And after all they had done for her. And this poor little mother was just worried to death, and did I think I could do anything to change the girl's mind if I would talk to her? And I said, how old is your daughter? And she said, 41. You see, she wanted her daughter to be healed. She wanted her daughter to be fixed. She wanted her daughter to shape up so she could be happy. But she was unwilling to see or to admit this obsession that she had had all of her life of trying to live her life through her daughter. See, she loved the suffering that she had found and was identifying with as a mother. And talk to her as I might, I could not help her to make the adjustments in her own mind. If only my daughter would change, was her thought. She was like the man at Bethesda, lying there for 38 years, knowing what the solution was, and trying to get into the solution, the water when it stirred, and never making it. Isn't that ridiculous? Isn't it? Stop and look at your life. If we continue to try to find the answers that we have found that are no answers at all, and keep trying to jump back into them year after year, isn't that some kind of insanity? If we don't go beyond our human thinking and begin to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us, isn't that some kind of thinking when anyone that is willing can have this experience? Isn't that some kind of insanity? In order to have this experience, one has to be ready for it. And the step that we're taking, we're entirely ready to have God remove all of our defects. Now, this requires a new intensity of feeling, a new readiness. It is the willingness to be healed, the willingness to be changed, not to have the condition changed. The change that took place in my life, that changed my life dramatically, was in a moment, in a split second. I knew that I was willing to have God fix me. Until that moment in my life, I thought that all I needed was something else to change. There's a tremendous difference. This requires a movement in our minds to become entirely ready to have God remove all of the defects, all of the bricks in our bucket, all of the old patternings, all of the old negative emotions, all of the things that we have clung to through fear and our sense of inadequacy, to become entirely ready to have this experience. So think about it this week as you continue to move forward in these 12 steps. Become entirely ready to have God heal you. So it is.